It's Pastor Kim coming to you with a Friday devotion. I remember traveling on an airplane and having friends and family see me off, not curbside, but at my gate. I remember picking up family and friends at the airport, not outside where the ground transportation is, but in the terminal at their gate, where I would eagerly watch the passengers deplane until I would spy my traveler emerging from the jetway. And there would be hugs and welcomes and joyful tears right away. I remember being able to walk into public buildings, whether a school, a post office, or a courthouse, without having to walk through a screening booth. I remember going to Brewers games without any screening, being able to carry in as large a bag as I could carry, and not encountering armored vehicles and heavily armed officers on my walk from the parking lot to the ballpark. I remember not feeling even a hint of anxiety when gathering in loud crowds, when the backfire of an old car or the rat-a-tat of a string of fireworks didn't make me jump or look for a safe place to hide. I remember a sunny Tuesday morning driving from my church office in La Crosse to a clergy meeting at a small congregation on the other side of the Mississippi in Bad Axe, Minnesota. As always, I was accompanied by National Public Radio, which interrupted its regular programming with an astounding news report about a plane flying into one of New York City's Twin Towers. There was much confusion and at first an assumption that the crash was a terrible accident. But of course, just a few minutes later, when a second plane hit the other tower, everyone knew that this was no accident. I remember arriving at my destination, the parking lot at Bad Axe Lutheran Church full of cars, and a dozen stunned pastors. The bishop quickly prayed with our group and then hopped in her car to return to her office in La Crosse. The rest of us went inside, the host pastor hooking up a TV and pouring coffee as we watched the unthinkable, the unimaginable, as it was replayed over and over and over again. We learned about the Pentagon attack and the hijacked plane that crashed in rural Pennsylvania. No one said a word. Finally, we prayed and took our leave. Everyone felt a need to be back in their own churches, some of us planning impromptu joint prayer services for that evening. I remember, of course, that we checked in on our families. My boys were 4 and 2 at the time, and even though we had very few details of what had happened, I instinctively knew that Paul and Sam would grow up in a world very different from the one I grew up in. As the days and the weeks and the months passed, we learned more. We learned about those who had died, those who had gone to work in the Twin Towers never to return home, those who served at the Pentagon and those who were aboard the wrong flight on the wrong day. We learned their identities and some of their stories. We learned about the brave firefighters, first responders, and police officers who knowingly entered the burning and collapsing buildings, giving their lives as they sought to help the people they served. We know about the war and the tens of thousands of people, military and civilian, who died over the past 20 years in an effort to make sure an event like the one on 9/11 would never happen again. It's been 20 years, 2 decades since the world as we knew it changed forever. Unless you're 25 or younger, you likely remember, as I do, exactly where you were and what you were doing on September 11th, 2001. 20 years ago tomorrow. This weekend, there will be remembrances and memorial services all over our country, even across the world, honoring those whose lives were lost in the attacks in rescue efforts, honoring those who helped to fight the war on terrorism wherever and however it was fought. Those commemorations are important. They're appropriate. They're both a way to grieve and to offer our thanks. The world has changed since 9/11 became another day that lives on in infamy. But we need not lose hope. The world has changed, but our God has not. The Bible assures us that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The good news in that sentence is that the God who creates, redeems, and sanctifies us has not stopped creating, redeeming, and sanctifying us into the people God intends us to be. God promises never to leave us nor forsake us. That was true before 9/11, and it remains true today. For those who were lost on that terrible day and in its aftermath, God was with them through all they experienced. I can't even begin to try to explain to you exactly what that means, but it is a promise from God that I trust, a promise that brings comfort and hope. As people of faith, what comes next? Well, I firmly believe that God's work and will in the world continue to be about reconciliation with God and with each other. God continues to call us to obey what Jesus names as the greatest commandment, to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. That asks of us the hard work of seeking common ground rather than focusing solely on our differences. It means getting to know others whose backgrounds and life experiences and thus their perspectives differ from our own. It's not excusing terrorist acts, by no means. But it does mean seeking understanding where we can. It means praying for God to soften our hearts and the hearts of those whom we see as our enemy. And it means remembering the great good news that God is not giving up on the world he created and so loved that he sent his Son to save. You know, we pray in the Lord's Prayer that his will be done on earth as in heaven. And that's a prayer that will never fail. While God's will remains to be completed, it will truly come to be fulfilled one day. In the meantime, we are invited to work with God and with each other to make the world a place where events like those of September 11th, 2001 will never happen again. So remember and pray that peace and reconciliation will come to pass as Isaiah prophesies in these beautiful words about the peaceable kingdom in chapter 11. Isaiah writes, "The wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Blessings on your weekend. I'll see you Sunday.